Welcome to Buzz is Building with our guy, Joel Smith. Every Wednesday, Joel is going to join us for the last block of the show to provide 5 players with buzz that you need to keep an eye on heading into week 6. Joel, very excited to be doing this segment with you, especially because we named it Buzz is Building because I'm washed up. You know, I'm trying to stay off social media. You're the social media guy. You're plugged into what people actually care about, what people are actually talking about, as opposed to me and all my routes and, Jurassic Park references, super relevant that we were talking about earlier. So that I'm very happy that you're here doing this with us, man.
Yeah, thank you. And they're still coming out with those movies, so you're good there. But trying to stay in the know. But this was the Buzz in the Building. I got to give you credit. Off the top of the dome, the name just out of nowhere. I loved it, so we're rolling with it for the title.
Yeah, well, it's about time I got something right in terms of a good name. So I was #due for that. All right, let's get into it. Who is the first player where we're building some buzz heading into week 6?
Let's go. Number 1 is Joe Flacco this week. I don't think I've ever been talking about Joe Flacco so much for fantasy football ever. But now he's with the Bengals, going from the Browns, which he was trying to help some guys out there, going to the Bengals. How much hope should we have? The positive, first off, so Chase Brown, that's been the big question too, because he targets the running backs a little bit more. 8.5 times this year per game in Cleveland. See, only at 5.4. So that was such a big part of Chase Brown's game last year. He led running backs as the starter in targets per game last year, so he's kind of lost that. Hopefully, Flacco can give that back to him. And then these short area targets, that's where it'll help a lot. Is because Jake Browning, a lot of the problems is just the easy throws. Some of those decisions on those short targets, trying to get the ball into those playmakers' hands, that was kind of the issue for a lot of it. So Joe Flacco, the veteran presence overall should help out there. When we're getting to the negatives, you see it on the screen. It's not the greatest. Yards per attempt, last in the NFL, 2 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. The main problem for me too is the pressure is the worry. People were talking about how the Browns also not really good in terms of pass protection, going to the Bengals where it might be even worse. That time to throw, before I even looked it up, I kind of just assumed the veteran quarterback, not the greatest offensive line. He's getting the ball out quick. His time to throw is not actually low. Top 12 among quarterbacks in terms of him holding on to the ball. And yet his average depth of target was still, as you see, 6.6. So he's throwing it short, but he was holding on to the ball a little too long. So I don't love that given the pressure that we got with the Bengals this year. So that's the big worry there.
Yeah, man, I got to be honest. I still don't quite know what to make of this Joe Flacco addition here. And I'm trying to be optimistic because, there's no way. Here's the thing, Joel. It almost can't get worse, right? It almost can't get worse than what it was with Jake Browning, right? So that helps. But the other thing that's tough here is just this week 6 matchup. He's going to start. Zach Taylor announced that today that he's going to start against the Green Bay Packers in week 6. We've actually already seen Joe Flacco go against the Packers because he did that with the Browns. To what was it, like 38 dropbacks at 3.9 yards per attempt? So not exactly exciting there, Joel. How are you treating these Bengals players in terms of rankings just for this week?
This week, pretty low. And I will say it has the best chance of being fluky. So when it's bad, you kind of want it to be fluky. But for Chase Brown, say, Green Bay is number 1 against running backs in terms of rushing fantasy points allowed. A lot of the problems is they can't push the ball downfield. They're not as creative, so that running game stalls out. How much does that offense get going when they have a ton of pressure allowed against those 4-man rush still? They can't really run the ball in Green Bay, not the matchup that you want to be doing that against. But yeah, I've seen a ton of people talking about Flacco, how he's beat the Packers already. I haven't seen many people talking about how he had 140 yards and 0 touchdowns. So in terms of fantasy, it's still not ideal. 140 and a touchdown. So I don't love it for this week. I did see, Harmon, that they called around, apparently, is the news around the NFL. They called about a lot of different quarterbacks, and the one they got was Joe Flacco. So confusing for this week, not too confident, but for Chase, it definitely helps both Chases, really. Long term, that's the hope there.
Yeah, T. Higgins is still the guy that I'm the most nervous about just because he runs those longer developing
100%.
routes. As you mentioned, Joe Flacco is hanging onto the ball for a long time to not go very far down the football field. So Higgins is still the guy that I think if you can get anything off this Flacco news and what he did in the box score last week, I'd be trying to maybe flip him for a better piece at this point. But let's go to the second player who's got some buzz building, actually back Joe Flacco's old team, the Cleveland Browns.
Isaiah Bond is that next person. So Flacco no longer there. What happened in week 5? Well, his route share and his targets still went up yet again. So it's been consistently better every single week. It was an interesting usage. He's in the slot, which I like because of Dylan Gabriel there. We saw in his first game, those tight ends get a little bit more involved. Hopefully, Isaiah Bond is part of that going forward too, because he had 7 targets, only 2 catches, but he had 4 of those deeper, intermediate, deep, middle targets. So nice targets to have, especially as a slot guy getting downfield more. 7 targets isn't bad, but we see Gabriel's targets where he was throwing the ball. Only 7 of his 32 targets or pass attempts that were targeted went to those outside wideouts. So 7 out of 32. The other 25 were to the middle of the field, inside, or not even the middle of the field, but to those inside receivers, tight ends, slot guys, running backs, that sort of thing. So Isaiah Bond has the opportunity outside of those other Cleveland receivers. I don't have as much faith in Jerry Jeudy having this big bounce back, but if we can get some of those downfield shots with Bond out of the slot, but a lot of those easy targets in PPR, that should help too. He's playing a little bit each week, more and more. We get a Pittsburgh defense this week where they haven't been the greatest against receivers. A lot of that is because of injuries, but even Jalen Ramsey's still injured right now, so we'll see how that plays out later this week.
Yeah, Jerry Jeudy has played terrible this year. 15% drop rate. They're having to play a lot of X receiver, which is a really it's a weird fit for Jerry Jeudy because he had so much success as their Z receiver last year, moving around, running routes, like true runway routes. But because Bond is not an X candidate, now that Cedric Tillman's not there, they definitely don't have an X receiver candidate at all because the next guy's like Jamari Thrash and Malachi Corley, who's barely even a real receiver. So they kind of have to use Jerry Jeudy there. But I do think that fits well with Isaiah Bond. And just for people who are unfamiliar with Isaiah Bond, if you didn't listen to some of our draft coverage on him, it's a weird player because he's an undrafted free agent. But he went undrafted because there were even prior to April, there was a lot of buzz that there was really big time negative character reports. And then in April, he turned himself in for because there was a warrant out for sexual assault. Like that's why he didn't get drafted. So there were major character red flags. That being said, Joel, he was really talented as a player. He can beat man coverage. He can win on in breakers, which is kind of the staple of what this passing game is. So I'm at least willing to keep an eye on Bond the rest of the way.
I like him. Yeah, with Tillman being out, that is a big part of it. And when you talk about like college, his targets per route better than Jeudy these last couple of weeks, and it was better in college than a guy like Matthew Golden.
Yeah, he was like a day 2 type talent that obviously went undrafted for a variety of reasons. All right, let's get to the third player that's got some buzz building.
Everybody's been talking. It's 2 guys, 2 different ones. Everyone's been asking about it. The Chargers running backs between Haskins and Vidal. This is an interesting one on paper because both of them did play the same amount after Hampton went down to injury, and the touches are the same. They both had 3 carries, both had 1 target. However, Haskins was getting some work, as in like a couple carries, in replacement of Hampton before the injury in that first half. And when Hampton went down, it was just one long drive at first where they got all their touches. And it was all Haskins first. He had all 4 of his touches. And then Vidal came in, had all 4 of his touches, end of drive. And that next thing is when Trey Lance came in, those backups, it got to 27 and 10. Haskins was out with the starters. So I feel like that's the biggest sign to go off of, him getting first half usage, him starting off that drive when Hampton went down to injury, and then him going out with the starters. So I don't love either because they are last in the NFL in terms of pressures allowed to Justin Herbert. He's dying back there. In terms of run block win rate, they're 24th. So it's not too much better with all those injuries on that offensive line. So Vidal, I think, will get a little bit more receiving. Haskins, more of those goal line opportunities when they are there and more of that rushing. So like him overall with the potential of having a lot better usage, I would take the shot on him. And desperate starts, they're okay because of the matchup. Miami, they're 31st against running backs right now on the ground, 28th overall. So Haskins would be my guy there too.
We just saw them allow a 200-yard game to Rico Dowdle. And the Panthers' rushing ecosystem is a lot better than the Los Angeles Chargers, especially with the current state of their offensive line. But, man, I mean, that's what's tough. I would love to just completely ignore these guys, Joel, because I do not have like a strong lean one way or the other. I probably give a slight lean to Haskins, if nothing else than all the reasons you said, and Harbaugh's got familiarity with him back to the Michigan days. It's why he brought him into this building. And Vidal is a guy that has never – he was playing a terrible running back room last year, and they just really never felt any desire to give him any opportunity. So I think I would give a slight lean to Haskins. I would just love to ignore this, but the matchup is too good to completely ignore the idea of either of these Chargers running backs.
Playing the matchup is okay for some leagues. Like, I don't say it with joy, but I am starting him in one league because I got like Nico Collins on bye. I got Ricky Pearsall injured. Doesn't look like he'll play. So I'm like, all right, my second flex looks like it's going to be Hassan Haskins against the Dolphins this week.
You got to do what you got to do sometimes. All right. Well, if I don't got a lot of juice for these Chargers running backs in terms of a strong feeling and strong debates, I'm very excited about these next two, but especially the fourth player that we've got building some buzz on right now.
I'm surprised you're excited about the fifth guy. Well, we'll get to that. Number 4, first off, I do agree. I love this guy. That is Stefon Diggs. So excited for his future. And who knows? Maybe it's just the pure hatred of the Bills of why it went off in week 5. But we got 2 weeks now. 2 weeks. And there's lots of good signs from both week 4 and 5, but also the season long. We see that 42% target share these last couple of weeks. That's the best in the NFL. 52% air yard share. But the big thing for me is that quarterback play. May has been incredible. And this passing offense has been just solid overall. But we look at that catchable target rate. 88%, that is high. That is top 5 among receivers this year. So May has been accurate when he is targeting. They're using Diggs well. About 42% of the slot. That's a great rate for him. And he is 6th in points per route, which I love that when we're looking for, because he is coming off this ACL tear. These last 2 weeks, why I highlight that specifically, not just because it's when he's been his best, obviously, but Demario Douglas, that's when his routes got cut. And Diggs became the focal point of this offense. So in terms of being 6th in points per route going forward, he's slowly running more and more routes. And we look at the top 5 guys in that stat, and they're the top 5 receivers in fantasy football. It's off the top of my head. We got like Nakua, St. Brown, Egbuka, Adunze, and JSN. And then number 6 is Stefon Diggs. So the upside, especially just with the floor 2 of his volume, I like both of them together.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense when you go back to why he started getting more playing time in week 4. This guy's coming off an ACL tear and it hasn't even been a year yet. So it would make sense that it's a slow ramp up that's crescendoing right now. And the part that gets me really excited, Joel, is that when we look at how he is winning, JSN leads the NFL, as I said earlier in the show with Nate, leads the NFL in yards per route run against man coverage at 4.97, which is an obnoxiously high amount. Right behind him is Stefon Diggs at 4.93, which for a 31-year-old receiver coming off the ACL tear not that long ago, and last year had kind of kicked into being more of a slot guy. I thought on film he looked like, no, he can still beat man coverage, but you don't know. You don't know what it's going to look like until you see it coming off the injury. Well, we've seen it so far this year, and these last 2 weeks he has been smoking man coverage and looks like, now, not prime Stefon Diggs, but looks like he could be a number 1 wide receiver for one of the best young quarterbacks in the league.
That is encouraging. And I think it is important that you point out that he's the number 1 receiver. Like, it seems obvious, but some of these times with these like breakout candidates, sometimes they're the wide receiver 2 or like the third option or a tight end. We don't really know if it's going to be as consistent. With the Patriots, like, this should be what it is. Like, this is kind of what we expected and hoped for, but it makes sense. So that gives me a little bit more confidence. And in terms of just going back to the points per route, just his production overall, where he's at, he still doesn't have a touchdown. So he's doing all of this without scoring a touchdown yet. One of the best receivers in fantasy these past couple of weeks, still hasn't got in the end zone, but that'll come too.
Yeah. Rest of season, like wide receiver rankings, where do you think you would have him? To me, I think he's like a top 20 guy the rest of the way.
Yeah, he'd be my top 20. I might do a season-long re-ranking soon. I think he would be around like that 16, 15 range, maybe. Mid-level wide receiver 2, but yeah, can get up there. He was the wide receiver 17 just last year. very different situation, but in points per game, he was wide receiver 17. I think he'll be right around there.
Yeah, he'd be somebody I'd even be willing to like. So it'd be a buy high, but I'd be willing to even still like try to get him on the team because I think people might not realize how good he is going to be the rest of the season. So let's go for our fifth and final player that's got some buzz building. We talk old wide receiver. Let's talk rookie wide receiver. Let it rip, Joel.
It's been up and down, and that is Travis Hunter. But we're getting close. We're getting close, I hope. If they can use him a little bit more, at least use him differently, that's what I'd be excited about. So he played 67% of the snaps last week, had 73, about 74 nearly percent of those routes run, which is plenty. So I think a lot of it is people are just, oh, he's not playing as much. He isn't being played on offense too much. He's playing enough. There's plenty of receivers. I went back to like in the offseason, talked about Jalen McMillan as like this wide receiver 3 in the Liam Cohen offense, was only playing like 72% of the snaps after the Godwin injury. And he was averaging over 14 points per game. So like, I think this is enough for his routes. It just depends on his usage. So we go back to week 1, he had 8 targets. 3 of those were screen passes. And we go to week 2, is that volume going to continue? He had a screen pass right away. And Jerry Jones went down to injury in that game. If you remember that Jacksonville corner, we have not seen a screen since that point. So he's playing a lot of defense now, and that'll continue, even though they're a little bit healthier there. He's been great on defense. But in terms of offense, he's out there. He just isn't being used a ton. And in this offense, Trevor Lawrence, he's kind of been this way throughout most of his career, but that first read quarterback. So 76% of his throws right now are with that first read. And that's just not really Hunter right now. He's mainly playing us as that primary slot guy. It'll be an interesting matchup this week. But as a slot receiver, when your tight end goes down, that's what gives me a little bit more hope. And we just see him making plays. So week 5 was kind of that first week where it's like, oh, there's Travis Hunter. He didn't put up the greatest numbers, but there was a couple times in that game you're like, oh, there's Travis Hunter. He's on offense. He's making plays. So hopefully that turns into him being a player in week 6 that is more counted on. They maybe design a couple more screens for him like they did at the start of the season. It slowly starts to get back on track because they need him with no Strange. Strange was one of their top pass catchers, especially in between those 20s. So I like Hunter just going forward, the potential that he has to get to the ceiling that we maybe thought he had in the offseason.
I like it. I thought we saw some really encouraging signs from him. You know, we saw more like deep post routes, deep crossing routes. You mentioned the kind of screen Mickey Mouse nonsense is getting cut out of his route tree, which is what we need to see. 26 routes last week. Brian Thompson leads the way with 34. De'Ami Brown 24. This is the first time all year he's run more routes than De'Ami Brown, which like De'Ami Brown, a nice player, but come on, like we got to get the main guys going here. 7 of 9 in terms of completion to targets to Brian Thompson Jr. and Travis Hunter for Trevor Lawrence, which was a good thing to see. So it's not there from a fantasy standpoint yet, but I think Joel's right. The buzz is building in the right direction, and we will continue to keep tabs on Travis Hunter. I just love the player. I really hope we see the best of him soon.